Perfect. So, a little introduction. Thank you all for making it here today for Alone with Your Thoughts and Feelings, Journaling for Men. So, a very warm welcome. Oliver and I are super happy for you all to be listening to this recording if you couldn't make it live. And basically, to get us in the mood of things, we're going to start with a quick grounding exercise. This is going to be part breath work and part visualization. So I just want you to find a comfortable seating position wherever you are right now. Close your eyes, and we're going to start with a quick breathwork exercise. It's called the 4-4-6 technique. Maybe you already heard about it. Well, we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold our breath for 4 seconds, and then let our breath out with like a nice energetic tummy breath for 6 seconds, right? So I'm going to start and I'm going to count to help you get in the flow of things. So we are going to inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, hold for 2, 3, 4, and release for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And one more time. Breath in, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 2, 3, 4, and then 6. And now in your own pace, couple more breaths. Okay, now slowly adjust your breathing to your normal speed. Kind of tune into your body where you maybe feel some tension. Is it in the shoulders? Is it in the hands? If you've been writing or typing too much, just try to focus on where your tension is, if there is any, and try to send your breath to that area of your body to kind of cleanse it and clear it away. Now that you have found that spot and hopefully alleviated some of the tension, we're going to continue with a little visualization, okay? So what I like to do with these is to visit your happy place. So when someone says happy place, what do you think of? Where are you at? Are you there alone? Are you there with other people? Was this a moment in your past? Is this an imaginary place? Take a few moments to find that happy place of yours and visualize yourself there now. Try to describe it with words, right? So how does it look like? What feelings are coming up for you when you're in your happy place? Do you associate with a certain season, a color, a smell? Just try to think of some of these words that you would use to describe someone, describe a happy place to someone else. And once you've done that, feel free to join us back again for our circle. Open your eyes, and hopefully you're feeling a lot more grounded joining us for this meeting today. Great. So I see thumbs up. Nice. Very good. Well, now we can get started with the introductions. Maybe Oliver, you would like to kick things off so that people who don't know you and what you are about get to know you a little bit better.
So, first, thanks for the grounding exercise. Actually, it's really useful to slow things down a bit. I think it's really good to kind of take that. Yeah, it's easy to be kind of quite tense. And this breathing exercise is really nice to kind of just feel like you're slowing everything down. So
You can do that every time, like in the morning when you're getting ready, right? 4 4 6. Let's practice it.
so about me, my name is Oliver Mann, and I have recently been kind of pushing myself into the journaling sphere, and it feels like I've been journaling for 30 odd years, like basically since I was a teenager. And although journaling at that point wasn't, I didn't define it as journaling. It was me writing and trying to get shit out of my head. But since then, I've been doing lots of different things. I've been kind of a serial entrepreneur and starting things and sometimes not even finishing them, just letting things go. But with the journaling, it felt like suddenly I tapped into something that made sense to me on a much deeper level. And what's interesting about it is I think the reason why it kind of worked differently for me now is I sense there's a real feeling of purpose here that is so important for it was such an important thing for me, and it's such an easy thing for people to start doing that I realize this is something that I want to really push out there as much as possible, because just the ease of using journaling as such an amazing tool for personal development and for healing means that it naturally is something that I'm doing, and I want to be able to help people experience more of that. That's where I am at the moment. So
Great. Thank you, Oliver. I'm going to do a quick auto introduction for the people who don't know me. So my name is Andrea. I'm the founder of Naectar. I'm also a recovering corporate girl, I would like to call myself. Had a career in the corporate world for 5 to 6 years until the point where it was just all getting too much and really felt meaningless when you wake up in the morning and you have tons of these tasks, but you really don't feel like you're alive. You don't get alive when you do them. It just doesn't feel fulfilling at all. And then at the time, I didn't know journaling as a tool yet. So I struggled a little bit more with making sense of that kind of life circumstance I found myself in. Because I like to think of myself as a happy and joyous person, and that joy just completely died inside of me and or went somewhere else and I couldn't find it. So I quit my job and I moved to a different country to really get away from things and to almost start a little bit from scratch while not forgetting the experiences that I had, made and the skills that I have gathered in my lifetime so far. And then I founded Naectar, my own company. So Naectar is about addressing people who are at that stage in their lives who may be feeling a little bit lost, a little bit stuck with, pathways, which pathway to take, and are basically opening up to hopefully a sooner universe of new possibilities. So whether that's through online events such as this one you're attending now, in-person workshops where we talk about just more mindful practices, things that connect you closer to who you really are. Or if it's not in a group setting like this in the workshops, then it's also through one-to-one chats with some of the Naectar speakers, Naectar heroes that I introduce on my Instagram. So feel free to check that out if you feel guided to. But that's what I've been doing the last year or so. And that's how I came across Oliver. And because we had so many parallels, really in common interests, we decided to host this workshop for you all today. And hopefully you'll find meaning in it. But that's it from me for now.
thank you.
Then a little bit maybe also logistics around the structure. We're going to start with a bit of a panel interview where basically Olive and I prepared some guideline questions. We're going to address the general feel of men's mental health today, why journaling is an important tool there and how it can help. And then towards the end, we have a creative writing exercise where you yourselves are going to be journaling about a certain, but give you a bit of direction, but it will be more free flow as Oliver prefers it that way anyways. So if you already have pen and paper with you right now, that's perfect. Otherwise, you can get it later. So yeah, Oliver, you being our journaling expert here today, maybe let's start with the very beginnings of how you got into journaling and what it meant for you then and what it means for you now. The tough one for
Yeah,
everybody.
no pressure. Actually, journaling was like I said in the beginning, it didn't happen as journaling. It was more of a tool for um, dealing with something that was inside me that I couldn't actually describe. I think I think I'd say I could live most of my life with this feeling that I was carrying around this monster inside me that was impossible to face. It was like there was something inside me that was just really scary to look at and to reflect on. So it was, and I'm not entirely sure how I can describe it, but it was this sense that there was a darkness inside me that was around shame and around guilt, and there was no kind of self-acceptance. It was just I was carrying around this heavy, heavy burden, and without knowing about what I was doing, I was writing a lot, and it was very typical kind of teenage, heavy kind of writing out stories that were obviously autobiographical and
Mm.
imaginary ideas of myself in different situations and whatever, but it became a tool to kind of reduce the pressure. So I think that's where I kind of realized later on how this came from a creative writing perspective for me. I wanted to be a writer. So, and I think most writers are very much autobiographical, especially in their early works, right? It's just a kind of like I'm the only character that I know very well, so I'm going to
Yeah,
find
you
ways
write
to
about
put
what
this
you know. Yeah.
exactly right. That's the starting point. So I think this is like where it came from me. Now going into the journaling aspect of it was when I actually took a course about shadow writing, which was the premise around shadow writing is essentially that you go into the depths and into the darkness of yourself in order to be able to portray that in your characters. So when you're writing, you want your characters to be deep. You don't want to be shallow, pointless people out there, because then the reader is also going to recognize it and go, well, this doesn't feel real. Because I think we naturally connect with depth, right? When somebody is showing some emotional depth, then we go, you're a real person. When we
Yeah,
read that book,
that's
somebody's shallow,
relatable.
then we're going, well, this is bullshit. Like nobody's like that.
Yeah.
In this shadow writing process, I was looking at a lot of this guilt and shame and these heavy feelings. And this darkness, this huge, big monster that I've been carrying inside me, I was basically, it was like shadow writing was like carrying a flashlight and going into a cellar.
Mm.
I was going into my own cellar with this flashlight and shining around, and it was pretty scary. And you're trying to like, okay, where is this monster that's been hiding there? And you realize it's not a monster, it's just like this little boy, right?
Yeah.
And that little boy was me. I found my little kind of my inner child somehow was there, and it was just terrified. And that's kind of the beginning, I think, of realizing the absolute power of being able to shine that light on ourselves. Because I think we all carry a ton of shit. Like we've got baggage from so many things that we don't even know are baggage, right? We just get all this
That
input.
we suppressed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're sponges, right? We're just absolute sponges for everybody's little side comments. Oh, you're like this, you're like that. And, or we hear other people talking about somebody else and we recognize ourselves, for example, in the person who's being talked shit about. And we go, oh my God, I'm like that. And suddenly we've got another layer on top of identification with something that's not positive. So this capacity to shine a light on that is incredibly powerful. And I think that was like the beginning of it in the sense that um it became self-awareness is what I keep talking about. Like self-awareness is absolutely critical. Like we need to have self-awareness in order to understand where we are, and that means we can move forwards. And then it also helps with empathy, and we need empathy to understand that other people are also moving forwards in their own way. And that sense, self-awareness and empathy helps us create this really magical situation. It's essentially self-awareness is me understanding myself in the big picture. Empathy is understanding that I don't know anybody else's big picture.
Mm.
I have a realization that I know more of myself, and I have enough empathy to understand that I don't know about you. So I'm going to accept
It
that
takes the
this
judgment
concept.
away. That's what.
Exactly, right? So I don't know where you're coming from. So how can I layer my level of judgment on top of you when I don't know you?
Yeah.
So, and I think once you develop that self-awareness, you understand how difficult it is, and you have a lot of respect for other people
Yeah.
being in their situations, right? You kind of get this sense of, well, there's this word I keep coming back to, and I think it's the most amazing thing. I'm going to misquote the definition, but it's the word sonder. And sonder is the understanding that everybody else has a complex inner life like you, and you don't know anything about it. Because I think we all go around with this sense that, shit, I am really complicated in the sense that, like, I love this, I love something completely opposite. This confuses me, but I also love it. We know that we've got a really complex inner life, but Sonder is the realization that everybody else has the same thing. And I love this. This is like one of my favorite little things on the street. You look at people on the street and you look at somebody like, they might look completely bland and normal, but then you imagine that what if all the shit and complexity of my life is also going on in that person's life? And there's this beautiful moment of realizing, shit, that person that I've just seen is a real human being with
Mm.
same struggles, going, I don't know why my friend said this to me. I don't know why I don't have a good conversation with my parents. I don't know what to have for dinner tonight. And it's like, we look at people and we have this tendency to think that everybody's got their shit together because we only see the outside. The packaging is neat, right?
Mm.
But inside, they're just as fragile, just as messed up as we are. But again, to bring it back to this point, that in order to be able to see that, I think you need to have a level of self-awareness, because you need to be willing to look at your own self and go like, I am pretty messed up, but that's okay.
Yeah. And thank you for that first avalanche of information. But now I was thinking about, do I interrupt him a couple of times because I had
Yes.
like individual questions popping up. And then when we were preparing, I said, oh, I'm going to moderate, no problem. But then you were so passionate about it. I was like, okay, I'll leave him talk for a little bit longer because it is really interesting what you're saying. But I think I'm going to step a little back and talk about the first topic that you mentioned with the flashlight and the cellar. I really love that image. And everybody's cellar is different, right?
Yeah.
There's different levels of darkness, there's nooks and crannies, some are larger, some are smaller. But the thing is, we all have some aspect of ourselves. Just by living, you acquire it naturally somehow. It's also a gift of life in a way.
Yeah.
And that flashlight and that cellar image, do you feel that that might come a little bit more difficult to, maybe the general portrayal of how a man is supposed to be, function in life, function in society, be a provider, be strong, etc. All of that say like these that for me typically are usually just like stereotypes, but again and again I come across men who actually believe that this is to be true. What is your experience there? We're talking about other men who maybe just started journaling.
So I think the big stereotype is that you don't worry about the cellar, you just lock it up.
Mm.
Right? If you think that there's a big monster down there, the solution is not to go down and check it out. The solution is to just stick another lock on it and hang something over the door so you don't see that there is a door, right? Because that's the process of, okay, so from my experience, right, this process of going into the cellar, right? It's the fear is, if I go down into the cellar and I do find a monster and not a little boy, and there is a real monster there, that monster will fuck me up and I won't function. That's why I didn't do it for so long. Because I
Mm.
literally felt, if I face up to this emotional, traumatic, whatever it is, and I look at that, there's a chance that it wins. And I cannot deal with that, because if
Mm.
he wins, I'm broken. And if I don't look at it, I'm surviving. And that's the point. I'm surviving. I can keep pushing it down and it will be fine. I'll just put another lock on. That
Yeah.
is going to be okay. But if I face it and lose, I'm fucked. So there's a
Yeah.
risk factor in there. And I think this is where this is the stereotype around it. And I think there's a stigma in the sense that you don't face up to it, you just push it down. Right. And I saw so many comments around this on Instagram, like where people like, there's this journal, men's journal, and the comments underneath it was like, just push it down. And some of it is obviously ironic, but the problem is it's not all of it is that. And I think there's this, yeah, I think for men as well, when it comes down to personal development, there's a feeling for me that it's very polarized, in the sense that you got, on the one hand, you got this kind of bare-chested alpha male primal scream, let's go into the forest and light some shit on fire. Right? And on the other side, you got this really sweet talking dude who's on a beach and doing yoga, and there's nothing wrong with either one of those. But like, I've done my yoga, it's nice, but I've never stuck. I'm like, okay, cool. And I mean, I don't mind going to the forest, but dude, like, it's not my jam to like make that. Neither one of
It's a
those is
larger
how I
spectrum, you're
feel.
saying, of like
Exactly.
what a man can be.
And I think that we are so polarized, in the sense we think that this has to be this, it has to be that, when reality is that we know that humanity is on a bell curve, right? The
Mhm.
polarizations have the fewest people. Most of us are stuck somewhere in the middle and going like, yeah, it's kind of, I wouldn't mind going on a trip to the forest, but I don't know if I want to necessarily hang out with these dudes.
Yeah.
And I like, I've been to Bali and hung out with the smoothie crowd, and it's not my jam, right? Like, I'm just somewhere in the middle, and it's like,
Yeah.
my reality isn't that. My
Yeah.
reality is somewhere in the middle. So I'm sorry, I'm just really sliding off topic with your questions, but
No,
it's
but I'm trying to put them back.
yeah, thank you.
But the question that comes from what you just said, why do we need like feel a need to have to put a label on it? Like, oh, I'm that kind of guy, or that's the way I function, or that's what people can expect of me, when really we're very multifaceted as human beings. And I feel like from at least my network, because on Nectar, unintentionally we're like 85% women. I don't know how that happened. Anyways, not going to go into that now. But I feel so much sense of openness from these women for topics like that, and to be vulnerable and to share. And as you said earlier, with the empathy and the self-awareness part, like for example, at our last workshop, women were so open in sharing, hey, I feel stuck at my job right now. I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm really good at it. But then I'm like, is that it? Is that all to it? And we were in that sharing circle, and everyone was so incredibly vulnerable and open about it. It makes you realize, oh, not only have I empathy for this person, but also I'm not alone. And that just widens the spectrum. It kind of explodes the spectrum, right? And how can we create more moments like that, that men also get to have moments of connection with other men, right?
So men and connection with other men happens all the time. It's just that it's not always in a kind of mindset of openness and free discussion around what's going on. And like, I mean, I'm lucky that I've got a lot of friends where I can have really open conversations with and just say, look, I'm feeling very heavy about something, or this is something that's bothering me. But there's a dynamic, I think, when there are more men together. It's easier to jump into conversations around work, around sports, around a lot of basic superficial things, because then you don't have to knock on the door to the cellar and check to see if the monster is still alive and awake, right? And this is like, as much as I don't want it to be the case, right? I was doing some research around the statistics on this, and when you realize that almost 80% of suicides are men,
Yeah.
you realize that in the UK, they were talking about 40% of men have never spoken to anyone ever about their emotions. That's 40%. That means that if you're sitting in a group of 3 people, one of those guys has never, ever, ever spoken to anybody about their feelings. And that's a lot of pushing down. And if you've been pushing down for that long, you've got a lot of reason to keep pushing it because you've invested a lot. And then we get into this kind of other idea that I'm sure you know about, like the sunk cost fallacy, where you basically, I've invested so much in pushing it down and I'm surviving, I'm all right. And the more you push it down, the more you think it's safe. And then the less interest you have in opening it up. And then you're stuck there, right? You've painted yourself into an emotional corner.
Yeah.
And you can't even admit that you have these emotions, because admitting that you have them means that you have to admit that there is a door there that you've been kind of
That
ignoring.
you haven't investigated.
Yes, exactly. And I think this is where it starts getting, this is incredibly difficult, right? And I think part of it is because everybody has them. Everybody has these things called emotions, right? That's the problem.
And there's again a wide spectrum of emotions, right? Because we're talking a lot about, the trauma and the darkness and the cellar, but journaling, for example, it's a beautiful tool to understand your joy, right? What brings you
Yeah.
happiness as well. There's a huge spectrum of emotions. So we're not just, dialing in on, what makes us broken, but what also makes us whole, as together as a society as well. Just wanted to side note, and no, please continue, Oliver. Sorry.
No, no, no. I think this is another really, really kind of important point for me, and I'm trying to figure out how to make this work, right? And this is essentially because we talk about mental health awareness and men's mental health, and I think the problem with awareness is that we all kind of are aware of it, right? And I think what we need to do is mental health action, right?
I love that you said the mental health action, because also when I was inviting people to this event, since we have the awareness, people are more like, okay, yeah, there are people like that, they struggle. That sounds like a cool event, but not for me. Like, I don't need help, that kind of. And I mean, what do you say to that? You can't really say anything to that. Like, no, I'm pretty sure that you do. It's not something that, is accepted as an answer like that. But this is why mental health action is important, right? Just daring to try something new without judgment, again, as you said earlier.
That's really interesting, actually. So I had a business experience around this. We were running a business before, and we were trying to actually offer coaching packages out to people, but we realized that if you offer coaching packages, people only buy them if they're willing to understand or admit to themselves they need help,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But we switched it around and said, do you want to help other people?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody goes like, oh my God, of course I want to help other people. But just like everybody who becomes a psychologist is pretty much a little bit fucked and need some help themselves. That's what they do. They go into psychology because they're going, I want to help other people. And then naturally they help themselves. So I think for me, that what I want to do is to get men who have the capacity to speak about their emotions to start the conversation, because I don't think we can expect the people who are struggling the most to be the ones that are most proactive, right?
Mm.
We who have our shit a little bit together and know that we are carrying a lot of stuff, but can talk about it, we should be the ones that start the conversation, because the person who's really depressed and doesn't look like it, this is another thing, right? People who are depressed don't look like they're depressed. They look like they're faking it and they're making it work because we think that they're all right. So our job is not necessarily to go and poke holes in everybody who looks like they're all right. Are you sure that you're fine? Because you might be depressed, which is obviously not a very helpful way of
Dating
doing it.
be a
But
candidate. Yeah.
we can. I wouldn't recommend that, going around like you look like your shit is too well together. Are you hiding something? But to be the ones who go first,
Yeah.
I think this is the thing, right? I did this video around this because I had this kind of moment where I was thinking, like, especially in English, like, oh, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine, everything's all right. But the question, how are you, is incredibly powerful. It's an opening question for somebody to go, actually, I had a fight with my girlfriend last night. My dog died. I'm feeling really sad. Work's shit. But we don't use that opportunity. We go, I'm fine. How are you? And then we lost this magical moment of going, what's really going on? So my invitation, I guess, my challenge is for the guys who are on the receiving end, like, how are you doing? Actually go, do you know what? I'm actually not feeling that well. Because it opens up for the other person to go, oh yeah, same here. But
Yeah.
if we're all pretending that everything's fine, then we're going to be like floating around without any depth. And then we end up talking about the weather,
Reality.
the football
Yeah.
results from yesterday,
Yeah.
instead of actually having a conversation about, you know, I actually feel a bit sad.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why I feel sad. Okay, that's okay too, right? And then we this builds such a level of empathy and connection, and it's the glue, really. It's the glue between people. And it's without, I mean, nobody, I don't think anybody really, really likes having shallow conversations. It's just that it can be very hard to take it to that level that goes kind of more interesting. But somebody had to go first. And I think this is the challenge. If you have the capacity to go first, go first.
Yeah. I also like what you said. I mean, I agree with everything you have said. But I really like the last reference of the glue between people, right? Because humans do have the capacity of extending that glue and creating that glue. Because, for example, when someone is down with the flu and they, call in sick for work, people are like, oh, let's send them a card, or let's send them flowers, or I'll take over their work for the week, no problem. So we're always here to extend the helping hand or show a gesture of support. But when someone calls in and said, "Look, my dog just died yesterday. I'm not going to show up to work. I physically can't. Like I'm down. I just can't." Then everyone's like, "Oh, okay." And then they just don't know how to handle it. So, but you could show the same sign of support and gesture, but with a physical illness too. There
Yeah.
we have a lot of acceptance, but an action. And with the mental health awareness or mental topics in general, we have the awareness. Okay, well, I'm just not going to leave them be, and that's it. But why not extend a gesture of support, or like, hey, if you need to talk, I'm here. Something, right? And journaling, for example, is a tool that you can do for yourself, also recommend to someone else. So there's tools that we can use to alleviate those burdens.
Yes. I mean, this is the mental health aspect of it is complicated, right? Because
Yeah.
it's so sensitive. And I think I like to think that everybody carries trauma around with them, but mostly because I think that being born is traumatic.
Yeah.
And growing up is traumatic. I mean, can you imagine for the first 20 years of your life, everything is fucking new all the time. It's like, shit, what's that? Like, it's a car. Well, what's this? It's like everything is new all the time. And that is quite a stressful experience. There's no kind of chill
Your
space.
nervous system to adapt
Yeah,
into.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. So it's really traumatic growing up. And I think that's the point, like you talked about the glue and empathy, comes from that realization of all of us having these things in common. And again, it comes back down to this level of self-awareness. Like self-awareness and empathy creates an understanding that I am not in isolation, right?
Hmm.
Because if we think that we are in isolation, we're not going to create connections because, like, well, nobody's going to understand me because I'm special. Like, I'm sorry, you're not special, right? You're special, but we are all special together, right? We're all suffering through this experience of being human together, but we all have this sense that it's all happening to us as individuals. And I think this is something that's been bothering me a lot the last, I don't know, quite some time. It's this massive polarization that's happening. And this polarization is causing us to resist connections because we
Yeah.
create like this massive, like, anti.
Distances. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is what I'm trying to kind of do with what I'm doing at the moment, is to get guys together and
To
use
create
journaling
a
as that
safe,
way. Hmm?
yeah, sorry, Oliver, but also it's really important to create that safe space where people feel like they can open up and where vulnerability and openness is perceived as strength and
Yes.
not a weakness. It doesn't lower your masculinity in any way. Quite on the contrary, as we were also saying earlier, Oliver and I, when I talked about to the event to some of my girlfriends, even women that I barely knew, they're all praising us for the initiative, wishing like, oh my God, can I send my boyfriend there? Like that would help him so much. That would make him 10 times more attractive to me. Because emotional availability is something that at least a lot of women that I know are definitely looking for in a partner as well, in a friend, in a father, right? So
And I think that it's a really interesting point actually, because I think we look at it from, like, I feel sometimes in my kind of journaling experience, I also have moments where I'm feeling incredibly weak, but I don't want to tell anyone because it makes me feel like I am weak.
Can I just say that this statement alone, like I want to applaud you for just this statement alone, because that just, in contrary to what you said, oh, I don't want to feel weak, I'm not going to tell anyone about it. That was just so brave and strong of you to mention it.
But
So
it's easy to say that when I'm not feeling it.
yeah.
But when I'm feeling it, I'm not going to say it. That's the
Mm.
problem, right? And I mean, it's not like I don't, but I do sometimes. But the thing is, when we have that feeling of being weak, we feel like we don't want to share it to anybody because we feel like we can't be weak, right? Because if I'm weak, who's going to pick me up, right? That was my experience, right? I felt like I can't fall because I don't have anybody to pick me up again. So don't fall. It's easy, right? But the other side of it is that when we see strong male figures admitting weakness, like you said, we go, oh my God, that's really brave. So as a man, you're then carrying this duality of I see some other guy sharing and saying that he's having emotional problems or he's struggling. We go, my God, he's so brave. But if I'm doing it, I'm a pussy. How the hell are you doing that? How do we how are we willing to accept this level of kind of bad behavior towards ourselves, right?
Mm.
Because it's the same guy who goes, oh, I don't want to, I feel like such a pussy if I say that. They would never tell a guy who has just shared something really vulnerable. Jesus Christ, man, get your shit together, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the society level of conversation. Get your shit together. But on an individual basis, you look at somebody who's actually showing vulnerability. Go, wow, that's brave. There's no way I'm going to do that.
Yeah. That
So,
was powerful what you just said. Yeah.
but this safe space is what I'm doing at the moment with these guys in the journaling group, right? And I had a welcome call with them last week, and I was absolutely shocked. Like, absolutely I was I was planning this really light, let's say hi, introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about where we are in our journaling process and what we want to achieve. And then suddenly I got four guys sharing suicidal experiences, like kind of thoughts. That's not a plus, is it? Like suicide, it's like terrible, terrible moment. So this and yeah, exactly down and uh abuse, alcohol and drug addiction. And it was just like, whoa, this is amazing, but
Yeah.
not what is on my agenda. Right. And I'm like, this is fantastic. I was like, so I
It's
just felt
like they
privileged.
couldn't wait to find an opportunity where they could really just be.
Yeah. And there's one guy who started and he just kind of opened up. And I think this is goes back to what I was saying before, that people who can need to go first.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Because some
And
of
he
us
went
are
first.
further along on the journey. So for
Yeah.
them, it might be easier to actually be like, I'm at a
Yes.
certain point. I have a certain level of confidence around my emotions. I'm going to do what I need to do to create some representation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really, really important. Yeah.
No, exactly. And this is the thing, right? So somebody who's kind of had suicidal thoughts at some point don't talk about it in the moment that they have them,
Yeah.
right? Like if I'm feeling suicidal right now, I'm probably not going to tell anyone. But after I've had that kind of processing and gone through it and realized, you know what, I'm better off alive than dead. And there's always something else that I can deal with and then work through. Then I can talk about I was suicidal, right? And I think this is the power of it, right? This working through everything. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Oliver. I think we went a little bit overboard with the interview part, but honestly, I just loved it. So I don't regret anything about it. But maybe we could dive into, as we talked about journaling as a tool, one of the most powerful tools to help us with our mental health, and get to the creative writing exercise. Would you want to present that to our audience, please, Oliver?
yeah, so there's a lot of different ways of journaling. It's an incredibly wide spectrum. So people use journaling techniques from completing sentence stems down through to poetry with dialogue writing and expressive writing, everything in between, and you can do it in kind of different modalities in a way you can do, like, am I doing cathartic writing? Am I doing reflective writing, descriptive writing? I'm not going to go on into all of this, but one of the most powerful ones for me, which has got the capacity of going to the depth that you are willing to go at the moment, is dialogue writing. And essentially, dialogue writing is as basic as it sounds, in the sense that you are writing down a dialogue, and one of the participants in this dialogue is yourself. And then the other participant can be anything of your choice. Now, an easy and nice and positive way, because journaling doesn't always have to be heavy and dark, is to have a conversation with, for example, your future self, like your wise future self. And like, imagine yourself at, I don't know, 70, 80 years old, and you're nice and chill and nothing bothers you anymore because you've been through everything 10 times already. And you're
I've
right.
seen it all.
Exactly. I've seen it all, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, etc., etc. Now, if you were to have a conversation with that person, what would they talk to you about? What would you ask them? What's the advice that you would want them to give you, right? And this is an incredibly powerful journaling technique, in the sense that you get an opportunity to explore and to challenge yourself, which I think is very important, because a dialogue isn't a question and answer. It's question and answer and follow-up question. And do you really mean that? What's actually going on? I do this in the morning, where I'm like just writing. I have conversations with my split personality, and I'll write, start the day with, how do I feel? And I'll write whatever is coming up, and then there'll be a follow-up question. Yeah, but why? Is that really true? Is that actually what's going on? And it kind of brings me slowly deeper and deeper. Now, and now that we talked about this before, like before this call, how deep should we go with this? Because dialogue writing means that the other person can also be a conflict situation. What are situations where you end up in a difficult situation? So let's say, for example, you live with a partner, and the partner keeps leaving the dishes, right? It's simple stuff, but it's this kind of shit that can turn into big arguments, and people end up like screaming at each other. Now, if you were to have that conversation and go like, in that dialogue with, what, not necessarily with the person who's leaving the dishes, but why am I so pissed off about these bloody dishes? They're just dishes. What is it in the dishes in the sink that's triggering me? And then have that way of exploring. And this is an incredibly amazing way to get self-awareness, because if you're asking this question and you're answering it, that's all you. So the thing about dialogue writing is that it can be incredibly uncomfortable in the beginning, because it feels like bullshit. Because you're kind of like, dude, this is me. This is me, my pen, and I'm writing two sides of this conversation. This is not some other entity, right? But the trick is to kind of have fun with it. This doesn't have to, like, what I keep saying about journaling is, no, your school teacher is not reading this, right? There's no creative writing teacher or somebody who's reading this and go like, this script is awful. This is not a natural dialogue. This is about a process of just understanding. So like, have fun with it, trust the process, and just really allow whatever comes up to come up, right? This is like the big thing about journaling, is to really trust the process and just not think that, oh, I've done it now. Like, just really go one level below. And this is another thing. And in every aspect of journaling, the most powerful thing is to go beyond the point where you think you're done. Because your brain will trick you, and it will trick you better than you can ever imagine, because it knows you better than you know you. And as soon as you start touching on the things that get really sensitive, basically the closer you get to the door, to the cellar, the quicker it's going to go, I'm done now, I'm fine. I've done my journaling for today. That's it. That's the point when you dig deep and you just keep going, because that's the point when your brain's going, I'm scared, I'm going to stop you from hurting yourself, right? Because this is part of it. The brain is protecting you from emotional pain. So if we keep writing this dialogue, I'm going to get scared. I'm going to worry about your mental health. I'm going to worry about how you feel, because we're going to touch on something now that's going to be a little bit vulnerable. So I'm going to stop you here. And the power is in not stopping there and just trusting that process, and just go beyond the point where you're going, oh yeah, I'm done. You're not done. You just started. This is where the real joy and value comes out of journaling for me.
Yeah. Because I was just going to mention that we talked a lot about the intensity of trauma and how journaling can help. But maybe for someone who hasn't ever done this, the question might arise, yeah, but why would I do it if suppressing has worked for me so far, right? And it's because that release is so powerful because the seller on your traumas, they don't control you anymore.
Yeah.
So it's powerful. And that's
Yeah.
where you can find the joy in journaling too, as you said.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think also a big part of it, I'm sorry, one more thing, and this is very important, is the sense that this is like you could obviously I could talk about this for some time.
it's a very meaningful topic, so by all.
Yeah, yeah. I think another part that I like to kind of push to people is the sense that if you go to the gym and you see somebody there who's lifting heavy weights, you don't think that the first time you go to the gym, you're going to go and pick those weights up because you know there's natural progression. You don't have that expectation, right? I'm going to pick up a 100-kilo dumbbell and go like, right, okay, oof, here we go. You know you're starting slow. So I think it's so important to give ourselves that benefit of knowing this is a process.
Yeah.
That means like I wouldn't recommend somebody having a dialogue with the idea of releasing generational trauma and having a conversation with a kind of imaginary grandfather to figure out what's going on. Just start chill and have a dialogue with your future self about how amazing you're doing, right? Like there are levels of kind of punishing yourself with emotional like don't go and pick up the heavy weight right yet because you'll damage your back and then you won't be able to go to the gym again for a while. So be kind to yourself.
That's a very nice advice. I think we should all follow that advice every day of our lives to just show ourselves some grace here, whatever we're doing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But so to summarize, we're doing a dialogue style journaling exercise with our wiser future self.
Yes.
And you're free to choose the circumstances of that scenario where you encounter your future self. How much time do the participants have for this, Oliver, to get us
I,
started?
I mean, I think let's start with like 5 to 10 minutes as just a dipping in. Like we're using this as like, you know, a small steps, right? So 5 to 10 minutes is enough to kind of get started and get used to the discomfort.
Perfect. I'm gonna chime in too. So I have my pen and paper. So I'm gonna put a timer for 10 minutes and you guys can already get started. Happy journaling. All right. That was 10 minutes on the clock. Feel a bit like a school teacher, like, please put your pens down. Okay. Yeah. It's not fun to say that, I have to say. I don't know why people. Anyways, different topic. Welcome back to the online event. Oliver, how are you feeling after this?
Actually, that was really interesting. I think this is why I keep doing this journaling, because um at no point do you reach the bottom. It's like an endless source of all kinds of interesting inputs. It's yeah, I had just a really interesting reflection um around vanity numbers, likes and shares and all this kind of stuff, and realizing that um the goal of what I'm doing is not to get the numbers, but to get somebody else to take action. And that's not measured. There's no social media thing that says this impacted my life and made it better. So
Yeah.
there's no numbers I can see that will show me whether or not it's working.
Yeah.
So it means I need to kind of let go of that and go, okay, well, the only thing that matters is if this has an impact on somebody and I can't measure it. So it means I have to let go of it. And it means that somebody who is watching it and not liking and not sharing and not doing anything might have an impact on it, in which case it's happening and I don't even know. So just let go and just keep doing what I'm doing. That's the only thing I can do. And drop the ego.
Yeah. Yeah. That's also one of my favorite things to say to everyone always. But yeah, I mean that's not what I journal about now. But it was interesting because I mean I don't regularly journal. I have like my, let's say, other tools that I do to support me with everything like what I go for in life. But I gave like, first of all, I liked future self, like future me. She was really cool, and she gave me advice contrary to what I would have given myself now. So that was really, really interesting to think of, like, where did that come from? But okay, I'm allowing it and I'm going deeper with it. So, but yeah, I
That's
mean,
fair.
this was for some of you, maybe this was the first time that you did an exercise like this. So we're going to keep the, let's say, sharing circle to this for the moment. But by all means, we invite you to either continue with this exercise, to try to incorporate methods like that more into your everyday. Do you maybe have some tips, Oliver, for people who are here or joining the recording later, how to incorporate journaling more frequently into their everyday life?
I mean, the classic thing is basically habit stacking, because we have a lot of habits that we do anyway. So for me, for example, I journal in the morning with a cup of coffee because I always make myself a cup of coffee in the morning. So that has always been like my baseline habit. That's where I would, so I'll put the coffee on to make the coffee slow, and I'll meditate while the coffee is brewing, and then afterwards I will sit down with my journal and hot cup of coffee. So that helps to create that scenario. I know that for other people who don't have necessarily that luxury of a lot of time in the morning, I think the key thing is to not put the pressure on that. I think a lot of times we think of journaling in the sense of morning pages. I have to fill 3 A4 sheets of paper in the morning and it's going to take me like half an hour. Don't just that's, if you can, fantastic. If you have got 1 minute and you write down whatever is going on right now, how I feel, whatever it is, or even start with simple stuff like gratitude. This is just really, again, we come back to that gym metaphor. You're not going to do morning pages right off the bat. If you can, fantastic, but don't worry about it. Just start the process of getting into the habit of picking up pen and paper, because a lot of the time, as we are in the digital age, I bet most people, the last time they picked up a pen to write something was probably to sign a bloody contract for something, right? So it's like,
Not fun,
it's
no.
not exactly, right? So, and it can be quite exhausting to write by hand. So just start slowly. And I just want to add one thing about this exercise we did now for people kind of once they've done this is to take a little bit of time after you've done the dialogue to reflect on it and to write down like what is it, what came up, what surprised me, what didn't surprise me. Like just have just a moment.
Journal on the journaling, basically.
Yes, yeah, 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 exactly. Because that's the kind of like the self-reflective part and what's the learning. And if you can, identify a couple of things that you can do and take action on in your life based on what you've learned. And just be kind, right? So be kind to yourself and be kind to everybody else around you. And yeah, take every learning that you can and apply it. This is like the key thing. Knowledge accumulated is worthless. Knowledge applied is invaluable.
That's such a beautiful way to end this event. I feel like this should be written on a t-shirt. Maybe we should, have
Sure, it
some
is. It is. I'm sure it's on a t-shirt somewhere.
Bleach Your Ink merchandise now available in your store. Okay, but perfect. I think we're gonna wrap this one up here now. So thank you so much for
Thank
everyone
you.
that showed up as listening as well. And also thank yourself, honestly, for being here because maybe this was something new for you. Maybe you were a little bit skeptic. Maybe you could think of other ways to spend Saturday morning. I get it. We get it. Okay. But you're here and we're thankful that you're here. So yeah, so we're gonna leave it at that. Thank you so much for attending. If you would want to know anything else about what Oliver and I are doing, we'll blend in our contact details and socials as well in the recording. So feel free to get in touch.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Then thank you, Oliver, for co-hosting this with me. It was a pleasure. And hopefully there'll be more of that.
I'm sure we'll still be in touch. We'll see. There'll be more stuff coming up in the future.
All right, everyone. Then take
Thanks.
care and
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Bye bye.